Tanzanian Mystery, Chapter 8, Trouble at the Lodge. Once the group arrived back at the lodge, they all realised how hungry they were, despite their massive breakfasts. They thanked their tour guide and drivers and hurried along to the restaurant for a late lunch. Mary glanced at the tip that Jim gave to the guide. It looked generous, and she wondered if Ned's theory was correct about him giving a more detailed presentation in the hope of a bigger reward. Mr. Samuel greeted the group as they arrived. He explained that a buffet of sandwiches and snacks was available for a picnic-style lunch. They looked around to see that a few of the other guests had taken their lunches outside to eat on the lounges by the pool, while others remained seated at tables in the cozy restaurant. "Have any more guests complained about money or valuables going missing since we've been away?" Mary asked the manager once the others in her group were out of earshot. Mr. Samuel Happy confirmed that there had been no more thefts reported since breakfast and expressed his hope that they had come to an end. Mary nodded in agreement, but a part of her still couldn't help suspecting that the robberies in the hotel had only paused temporarily because the culprit had been out at the village that morning. She put the thought out of her mind while enjoying her lunch of cheese sandwiches, fruit and juice. After lunch, the group decided to disperse for the afternoon. Mary, Scarlett and Travis went to change into their swimming costumes to make the most of the pool. Ned and Larry set off for bird watching by the stream, while Jim, Sue Ellen and the two German ladies chose to sit on the comfortable chairs in the bar for a drink. Jolene claimed to have a headache and returned to her tent to lie down. Mary was a little surprised, as she thought the woman had cheered up since the morning, although she guessed that she just needed some space for the time being. "So, what was your sister so upset about today?" Mary asked Travis when they were seated comfortably by the pool. "Oh, something or nothing," he replied with a shrug. "It doesn't take much to put her in a bad mood." Mary sighed. "But what about you?" she asked tentatively. "What have all the arguments between you and your father been about?" Travis paused before mumbling, "I think you can guess." "Money?" she asked curiously. "Well, yeah," he replied. Then he suddenly muttered, "Excuse me," stood up from his chair and dived into the pool. Mary watched him. She felt disappointed by the way he had clammed up at her questions, but at the same time she understood that he probably didn't want to talk too much about his private life with a woman he had only met a few days ago. She was about to chat to Scarlett about her theories, but noticed that her friend had drifted off to sleep in her comfortable sun lounger. So she tried to ignore the niggling feeling in the pit of her stomach while she enjoyed an afternoon of swimming, reading and relaxing in the warm African sunshine. After several hours of sunbathing, Mary decided to get an ice cream from the bar to cool down. She looked gloomily at her reflection in the restaurant windows, not at all surprised to see that an afternoon in the sun had left her quite sunburned. "Well, that's typical," she thought to herself dismally. "Everyone else returns from their holidays looking nicely tanned, and I just look like a boiled lobster." She realized that she must have forgotten to reapply her sun cream after swimming, and miserably went through the open door to the restaurant. Mary was surprised to find Jolene sitting at the bar with Hassani, the handsome barman. Both were smiling and laughing together. A few other guests were relaxing and chatting on the comfortable sofas, while the waiters were once again preparing the restaurant for the evening meal. "Oh, so your headache's better then?" Mary asked, with a slight hint of sarcasm. Jolene was startled. She had been so focused on the barman that she hadn't noticed her coming over to the bar. "Yeah, I'm fine now, thanks," she replied blandly, turning to look at Mary briefly before returning her gaze to the attractive barman. Unsure of what else to say to the woman, Mary simply asked for an ice cream and sat down on a comfortable sofa to eat it near a group of guests who she did not recognize. "Hey!" She was greeted by the familiar voice of Matt the pilot. "How are things?" Even though he was dressed in his casual t-shirt and shorts rather than his uniform, he still looked handsome. He sat by her and began to tell her about his trips back and forth with guests over the past few days. Mary in turn told him about their adventures on safari and in the traditional village. While they were talking, Jim and Sue Ellen entered the bar. "Hello, where have you been?" Mary asked them politely. With a warm smile, Sue Ellen replied that they had been walking around the grounds with Frau Muller and Frau Schmidt, but now they had returned to the bar for a drink, while the two German ladies had gone for a rest in their tent. While she was talking, Jim glared at his daughter and the barman. "Jolene, what are you doing with that man again?" he asked irritably. "We're just playing bow," Jolene replied nonchalantly, avoiding her father's gaze and indicating a traditional African board game that she and the barman had been playing. Hassani looked embarrassed, stepped away from Jolene, and began to busy himself by loading some glasses into the dishwasher, avoiding Jim's gaze. Jolene looked disappointed. "Anyway, I told you this morning that it's none of your business what I do and who I choose to hang out with," she added angrily. "It is if you choose to spend time with lowlife like him," Jim blustered, pointing at the barman, who now stood looking furious at the insult. Hey, let's calm down," Matt leapt to the defence of his colleague. He wanted to defuse the situation, but his efforts were ignored by the enraged woman. "Lowlife!" Jolene shrieked. "How dare you call him that? He's a wonderful man." At this outburst, the manager hurried over, leaving a puzzled group of new guests to watch the argument from the check-in desk at the other side of the room. "Please, I must insist that you lower your voices," he spoke calmly and authoritatively. "I will not have the peaceful atmosphere of my lodge being disturbed by your arguing." Sue Ellen nodded, also feeling uncomfortable at the situation. She apologized and spoke softly. "Come on, Jim," she urged. "You can't tell Jolene who she can and can't be friends with. She is an adult." "But that man is no good," Jim persisted stubbornly. He spoke a little quieter, but he was obviously still annoyed. "He already cheated Travis out of hundreds of dollars. I don't want Jolene being mixed up with him too." "What is this?" Mr. Samuel asked incredulously, glaring at Hassani. It's not what you think," the startled barman stammered nervously. "We were playing cards and—" The hotel manager did not let him continue. "Please leave the bar immediately. We will discuss this later," he said firmly. "But boss, we were just—" Hassani pleaded. "No more excuses," Mr. Samuel interrupted him again. "I already gave you a warning about this behavior. Now please go to your room and wait for me there. We will discuss this later." Seeing that it was no use trying to explain, Hassani let out a defeated sigh, shot an angry look at Jim, left the bar and walked in the direction of the staff housing at the rear of the lodge. "That was unnecessary," Jolene complained to her father. "I'm so sorry about this situation," Mr. Samuel spoke briskly, ignoring Jolene's comment. "You should have reported the incident to me the moment it happened." "Well, it was my fault," Travis stammered, glowing red with embarrassment. Surprised, Mary turned to see that he and Scarlett had entered the bar amidst all the commotion. "He and I were playing poker one day, just for pennies, but then I suggested raising the stakes," Travis explained nervously, doing his best to ignore the furious glares from his father. "Hassani won the game, so now I owe him money. He didn't cheat or anything. He won fair and square. He's just better at poker than me." "I see," Mr. Samuel replied pensively. "Like I told you already, I will speak with Hassani later. It is not right for any of my staff to gamble with the guests. And I have told him that before. Now I suggest that you speak with each other calmly and quietly from now on, so that you don't disturb the other guests." With that, he returned to the check-in desk, ushering Joseph to the bar to stand in for Hassani. The porter eyed the McKinleys suspiciously as he tidied away the discarded board game and politely served a few guests who had cautiously approached the bar. "So," Jim said after a long pause, "I know that you two are adults, but I do wish that you would listen to my advice. I only want what's best for you." He spoke in a lower tone, looking with concern at both of his children. Yeah, I get it, Dad, I'm sorry, Travis replied softly. I just can't help myself sometimes. His voice trailed off and he looked at the floor, feeling too ashamed to finish his sentence. Jolene, on the other hand, was not willing to make amends. Look, just because Hassani beat Travis at cards doesn't mean he's a bad guy, she ranted. We all know that Travis has a weakness for that kind of thing, and he shouldn't have bet all that money. But that doesn't mean I should be forbidden from spending time with him. And now he's in trouble with his boss because of Travis's mistake. That's really unfair. She turned angrily to leave. But he is a scoundrel, Jim called out after her, ignoring the shushing from the waiters and nearby guests. He has a wife and kids that he didn't tell you about, and he led you on. What? Jolene replied. Everyone saw the shock on her face as she turned to face her father again. It's true, Travis interrupted apologetically, stepping in between them. He showed me a photo of them when we were playing cards. His kids are really cute. They live in a nearby village and he goes to visit them on his days off. Why didn't you tell me that before? Jolene sniffed. I'd never have gotten involved with him if I'd known. She burst into tears and fled from the room, hurrying along the path towards her tent. So Ellen hastened after her while Travis mumbled an apology that she didn't hear. I didn't know you liked him that way, or I could have warned you. After a long pause in which the other guests tried their best to pretend they hadn't been listening to the argument, Scarlett announced that she was going to get changed for dinner. Mary joined her eagerly. She was slightly shocked by what they had just heard and wanted to discuss so many things with her friend without the others listening. Once back in the tent, Scarlett just laughed at the theory Mary presented of Travis stealing money and valuables from the other guests in the restaurant, much to her disappointment. He's not sneaky enough to be a pickpocket, she giggled. Haven't you seen the way he stomps about? It's hard to be secretive when you're that noisy. They had both showered and changed into their evening outfits before Mary explained her ideas. She carefully rubbed a soothing after-sun lotion onto her sunburned skin while she spoke. Anyway, my theory about Jolene being annoyed all morning because Jim didn't approve of her spending time with Hassani was correct, Mary announced with a hint of triumph in her voice. Oh, it's worse than you think, Scarlett explained. Jim saw the barman sneaking out of Jolene's tent early this morning. They had spent the night together. Oh my, Mary gasped. No wonder she was so upset just now. Exactly, Scarlett replied. But how did you know? Mary asked, feeling surprised. Well, Travis told me the story when you went to get ice cream, Scarlett explained a little hesitantly. Mary was disappointed. She wondered why Travis had told Scarlett all about the situation when he hadn't given her any information. She asked what else he hadn't told her, but her friend just shrugged. It's really none of our business, she had replied, absent-mindedly gazing out of the tent windows at their now dark surroundings. When they were ready, the two women returned to the lodge for dinner. The air felt much cooler, although Mary was disappointed that there had not yet been a thunderstorm. She had been looking forward to looking at the lightning in the wide expanse of sky. They found Ned, Larry and Travis in the restaurant, tucking into large plates of delicious food from the buffet. Mary and Scarlett joined them after choosing their own meals and asked where the others were. Travis checked a message on his phone before replying. Jolene's still crying in her tent, Mum's with her and Dad's sitting on the porch. Apparently he's trying to apologise, but Sis is still mad at him and so she's not letting him in, he explained wearily. Scarlett offered to help in any way they could. Thanks for the offer, Travis replied. Perhaps you can help us carry a few plates of food over to them after we've finished eating. Mary and Scarlett agreed. They ate their meals while Ned and Larry eagerly told them about their experience that afternoon while bird watching. We were by the river, near the place where you decided to climb over the fence, Ned began to explain. Mary shuddered at the memory of narrowly escaping the crocodiles when she had last been in that area. Some safari drivers came along and seemed surprised by something, Larry added. They looked over the fence at where some crocodiles were basking in the sun, and they pointed at something, although they were talking to each other in Swahili, so we're not at all sure what they could have been saying. But they were definitely concerned about something, Ned continued. We could tell by their tone of their voices and the way they were all looking at each other. Maybe they were worried about the fence not being strong enough and the crocodiles being able to get into the lodge grounds, Scarlett suggested a little fearfully. No, it's not that, Larry replied. They were looking and pointing at a place away from the fence, at a patch of flattened grass and bushes. It just seemed strange. Mary and Scarlett agreed that it did sound puzzling, although as long as they continued to be safe from crocodiles and any other wildlife that were lurking just outside of the lodge grounds, they didn't think the area beyond the stream was anything to worry about. After they had finished eating, they selected some food and cakes to take to Jim, Sue Ellen and Jolene. They nodded a cheerful greeting to Matt as they left the restaurant. He had just entered and looked disappointed that they were leaving, although Mary noticed him go to sit with Joseph at the bar to have some company while he ate his meal. She was not surprised that Hassani was not in his usual spot that evening, and wondered a little regretfully if he had been fired. Mr. Samuel had been eyeing all of the guests carefully while they ate, possibly in an attempt to catch the pickpocket if he or she decided to make another appearance that evening. As they approached Jolene's tent, the group was surprised to find her and Sue Ellen looking anxiously up and down the path and calling for Jim. "Oh, where is Jim?" Scarlett asked, while they set the plates of food down on the wooden table on the porch. "We don't know," Sue Ellen replied, a little flustered. "He had been sitting outside the tent, but we didn't see him when we came out just now. We looked around for him and tried calling his phone, but he's not answering it." "Well, let's look for him. He can't have gotten far," Travis suggested. The group agreed and split up in different directions to search for Jim, calling his name as they went. They searched both the main walkways and even the dark, narrow paths behind the rows of tents, using the torches on their phones to see in the gloom. After a few minutes, they heard a piercing scream. Feeling an overwhelming sense of dread, Mary, Scarlett, and the others ran towards the sound. They found Jolene sobbing and kneeling on a dimly lit path, holding the hand of her father, who was lying still on the ground. At the sight of the man, Travis and Ned immediately rushed to look for the doctor, while the others cautiously approached. Jim lay lifeless on the path. His face was frozen in a shocked expression, and his legs were splayed out at odd angles, as if they had given way. One hand was now being grasped by Jolene, while the other remained motionless beside him. Mary gently felt for a pulse and noticed his head lay in a pool of blood, and there was a deep bloody wound on his chest. "He's dead," she said softly. "Oh, my Jim," Sue Ellen wailed, clutching at his still body. "I don't think we should touch him," Mary whispered. "The police will need to check his body. Maybe they will find a clue to tell us who did this." Sue Ellen and Jolene reluctantly let go of Jim and hugged each other for comfort. Scarlett hastily sat down next to them, offering her condolences, while Larry paced feverishly back and forth. Mary remained in her spot, too shocked to move. Soon Travis and Ned returned with the concerned doctor, lodge manager, and a few porters. All were panting from their run. Dr. Grace hastened to join Mary beside the body and sadly acknowledged that there was nothing that could be done. She looked over him and spoke in Swahili to the manager in a voice full of emotion. His face grew grim and gave the porters an instruction before addressing the family. "I am extremely sorry for your loss," he said, while the porters ran in different directions at their boss's command. "This does not look like natural causes, so we must inform the police. No one should disturb this area until they arrive. I recommend that you all go back to your tents. You will be safe there." "Not me," Travis declared. I'm going to find out who did this." He marched purposefully down the path with Ned and Larry hurrying after him. "But there are already men looking for the culprit, and it could be dangerous," Mr. Samuel called after them, even though they were already too far away to hear most of his warning. With a sigh, he wiped his forehead, took out his walkie-talkie, and gave another instruction that the tourists did not understand. "Please go to your tents," he urged the women again. "My staff will come to patrol the grounds. You will be quite safe, and it will be more comfortable in your tent than here on the floor," he explained. Reluctantly, Jolene and Sue Ellen bid teary farewells to Jim before allowing themselves to be led back along the path to their tents. Mary and Scarlett joined them, feeling it would be better to stay together for the time being. As they walked, they saw several lodge staff running around, presumably to verify if the killer was still on the grounds, while others checked on the guests who had remained in their tents. All reported to be fine and were confused at being disturbed by the flustered porters. Two of the strongest-looking porters came to stand guard beside Jim's body, while the other lodge staff patrolled the paths purposefully, as Mr. Samuel had promised. Many of them carried tranquilizer guns, which Mary was sure would be a good deterrent to anyone who wanted to cause more trouble.